If you are a dismissive avoidant or have a partner who is, have you ever noticed that expectations can be a big issue? So in today's episode, I'm going to dig into a little bit more on how this plays out and what to do about it. Hey everyone, I'm Sonia, and on this channel I strive to help you with relationship tips and attachment style healing so that you can have the most fulfilling lives and relationships possible. And I am now open to one-on-one coaching, so if that's something that interests you, getting a little more help there, go ahead and check that out in the description box below. So DAs, dismissive avoidance and expectations. It's something that I have experienced with my partner and with other DAs who I know. And it can play out a couple different ways in terms of how it shows up. So I'll just talk about a couple of those in case you might recognize it that way by how it shows up in your lives and relationships. So one way is that it might show up as a dismissive avoidant individual not wanting to do something for you or interactionally with you because they're worried that there will be an expectation of that happening in the future. So it's kind of like, well, if I do that, then it's setting up that I'll always be doing that. So sometimes that's how it shows up. It can also show up with the dismissive avoidant person having the almost worry that they think that the other person has expectations and they don't know what they are, and that's making them uncomfortable. So better communication skills will help with this. I'll get into that when I get into the what to do about this section of the video. But I don't know if you notice, there's sort of almost like a closed loop that it seems like is going on there, where a dismissive avoidant might resist communication in a way or a request because of that first point of thinking that it's going to be a continual expectation. However, there's also this need for communication so that there isn't this thought that there are these unmet expectations that are just sort of lurking all over the place. So it can feel kind of insurmountable because it feels like almost like that closed loop, like that almost like communication would be a problem, although I'll show you how it isn't. And at the same time, it's necessary. So in resolving this, I want to talk about kind of a two-part insight. They're kind of two separate insights, but they're related, that are foundational. And this is really for both people who are in the interaction or in the relationship. So of course I'm talking about it as if this is an insight that the dismissive avoidant needs to have, but really everybody needs to have this understanding, which is that there's a difference between expectations and vulnerable sharing or communicating, and two, what will actually happen, what's going to proceed in the future with what is agreed upon and acted upon, and or how behavior changes. What will actually happen is in fact still a negotiation. So those are the two things, that there's a difference between communicating and sharing something and expectations, and that what will actually proceed from there is a negotiation. And I just want to make a side note here too, for communicating with a DA being so fundamental. I mean, it's fundamental for everybody, right? But for a dismissive avoidant, they really do prefer directness and really do not like the mind reading thing. Really that's not healthy for anyone, but they super do not prefer that and really do prefer more of a roadmap of what to do. And they can sometimes, that's partly sometimes because they sometimes don't feel like they're good at relationships because they might have a defective core wound around that. So that makes the actual communicating very clearly an important aspect for a DA in relationship, or if you're in a relationship with a DA. And the other piece of that is it can help with where dismissive avoidants often have these really hard boundaries. This negotiation piece, like I was talking about from the insight, can really help with the hard boundary thing, because often a dismissive avoidant will set a hard boundary because they don't necessarily feel like they're going to be able to negotiate the nuances. But if more communication and more of the relationship can always be viewed as a negotiation, and there can be that understanding, then those hard boundaries can be softened. And if they don't, for example, let's say they will not go out and do something because they don't feel like they'll be able to leave when they need to leave, something like that. So in this case, they wouldn't need to set that hard boundary if they've more learned, like all of us need to, that there can be negotiation along the way, that there can be those pieces, and that that's how the communication really plays out and what it's for. So I guess I'm emphasizing that because if communication has not been going well as a dismissive avoidant or with a dismissive avoidant, I just want to give you hope that it really can be such a useful thing to really work on communication And hopefully I've convinced you that it's also is just super important. With that said, more that insight approach, the thinking about it approach, let's take the approach now of the what to do about it. So let's put it into those terms and talk about 3 things to do about it. So one thing to help with dismissive avoidance, whether you are a dismissive avoidant or whether you're in a relationship with one, to help with sort of a fear or dislike of expectations, perceived or not, is to heal and reprogram a belief about being helpless in or defective at relationships. This is often an underlying core wound for dismissive avoidance. And even though I'm focusing mostly on the interaction and communication, I don't want to leave that out, because if that healing work is done, that can be really fundamental towards changing a lot of these ways that this kind of stuff crops up for a dismissive avoidant. So if you're dismissive avoidant, I really recommend that particular line of core wound reprogramming. And there are some other videos that you can find about how to do that, and I will link one in the description box for you. Number 2 for what to do if you are a dismissive avoidant or in a relationship with a dismissive avoidant and a fear of expectations is coming up is kind of along the lines of what I talked about in the understanding, but taking it a little further. So the understanding the difference between communication or sharing and expectations. But putting this into practice, it can help to think of it as your job in an interaction, in a communication, let's say with your partner, as active listening. So thinking of it as you're going to active listen first, and then you're going to share your side of things. And that's a key part too, actually vulnerably sharing back your own perspective. And that may sound easy, listen and then talk, but that is actually one of the hardest things, right? Especially if we're at all feeling reactive, or, if you're dismissive avoidant and you're already worrying about the expectations piece. If you can really get in your mind that your job in that particular situation is active listening first, and that's what the point is, that you're going to receive what they're saying and understand it, and then going to respond in kind, that really is a huge key, but very difficult. And then number 3 for how to address the fear of expectations that dismissive avoidants often have, if you're a dismissive avoidant or if you are in relationship with one, is to really focus on ongoing communication after an issue is first shared and responded to as being a negotiation about what really is going to happen, which is really about expectations in the future, right? What's going to happen isn't expectations, it's a negotiation, which means it can also be renegotiated, right? And also realizing that this is important and that is the right way of looking at those kinds of agreements that we make in relationships. So that could be important. Maybe you're the dismissive avoidant and you do think that your partner has expectations that they don't say out loud. And so that could be part of what you request in the relationship for yourself as well, is that the communication goes that direction. So again, I'm talking about this as if it's to teach dismissive avoidance, but really it's for all of us. So what does it mean in practice? A little more concretely, it means taking responsibility for this and actually practicing it. So taking responsibility to make sure that that's the understanding in the relationship, is that the ongoing communication is a negotiation, and to actually do that, actually negotiate. So that means really bringing your perspective into it. Also realizing that the other person has a different perspective, and then that you're going to have some compromises in either direction. So it sounds again like, isn't everyone doing that? But often we're not. Often we're not, because we're in these patterns of communication where we're not doing that. So if we can very concretely and consciously realize that after the initial sharing, often for issues, then the next part is negotiation. That is the key. Actually doing that though, and practicing it. And again, to bring other people than just dismissive avoidance into this, if you are watching this and you are the partner of a dismissive avoidant, making sure you are actually doing that too. And truly practicing it, so that the dismissive avoidant, not only is it emphasized to them that this is the case, that it's a negotiation, and they can hear it and absorb it, but that they can also trust that it is a negotiation that they are a part of as well. So hopefully this was helpful. Let me know in the comments below if you have any further questions, or if you have another topic that you'd like to propose for the channel. And thank you so much for watching.